Bridges and Tunnels, I'm going to call it to order. First order of business is public speakers. We have one public speaker, Mr. Bowden.
Good morning. This is number 7 in a series of presentations over a 2-week period. Last Thursday, my granddaughter Samantha helped me at the NIMTIC meeting describing the iPad. Today, I'd like to have a new assistant. Mitch, could you come up here for a minute and help me? Mitch?
No, that's okay. I'm listening.
No, I need you up here. No. Come. He can't come up? Well, this is about culture. We have a certain culture here we can't change. But what you just said needs to be put into the record about the New Hampshire Turnpike and about high speed, and it doesn't need to be speeding lanes. Mitch, could you repeat what you said a few minutes ago, please? Turn your mic on.
All I said was I had the opportunity in New Hampshire over the weekend to use their new high-speed
Better to say
Easy Pass.
highway speed.
Well, it was
Right.
65, which to me is high speed, but
Right.
that's okay.
It's on a New Jersey Turnpike. It's on a New York State Thruway. It's all over except on a Henry Hudson Parkway. They break it up into 4 lanes instead of 2 highway speed lanes. What they're doing is so bad safety-wise, I can't imagine how I can explain it again. But until Mitch told you what he saw up there, which is common everywhere else, bridges and tunnels. This was not my presentation. It changed because I heard what he said off the record. You're spending tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on a wrong design of toll booths. I've said it before, but not until Mitch just said it on a record from your own people do you begin to realize how bad the planning of bridge and tunnels is. And if they're wasting millions of dollars on, they built a gantry to hold an Easy Pass reader on a Henry Hudson when you could have put it right underneath the highway. How much money did they waste on that?
20 seconds.
I've been asked to keep it short by various people, and since I work with these people, it's not my desire to embarrass them. I've successfully embarrassed the management of bridges and tunnels. It is your responsibility sitting around the table to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
Alan,
Chuck.
could somebody answer that? I use the Henry Hudson Bridge. I'd like to know whether or not we could have done better and whether we spent too much money.
Jim?
Which question would you like me to answer, sir?
Okay, let's do the first one. Do we have the appropriate number of lanes, or should we have more or less?
Since it's a pilot program, we started out, I believe, with 1 less than we have now. It was inadequate, and we added an additional lane to move the traffic through the toll plaza at a greater rate, meaning the rate of vehicles per lane. Sir, if I remember correctly, you were part of that initial
correct.
onset, and you were caught in the
Absolutely
delay.
Absolutely correct. Second part, did we have to erect the gantry there?
We built this AET. It's not high-speed tolling. It's all electronic tolling, and we utilized our existing infrastructure, including our toll system, our current toll system. We budgeted $10 million for the project, did a lot of in-house work, and yes, we did need the gantry.
Wanted the questions answered for the record.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Public comments period is finished. Approval of minutes. We have minutes for the January meeting in the packet.
I move the minutes be adopted.
We have a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Committee work plan. Are there any changes to the work plan?
No.
Okay. Moving the agenda. A report on operations. Safety report.
David?
Okay, thank you, Jen. The report on operations begins on page 13. Since it's the end of the year, it's divided into 3 parts. It compares December 2011 traffic to December of 2010. It also compares 2011 performance to 2010. And the third part looks at 2011 over the course of the last 5 years. Taking the first part of the report, December's traffic was 23,665,000 crossings, which was an increase of 696,000 crossings over the prior year. Unlike last year, there was no snow accumulation in December. In addition, the weather was considerably warmer by an average of 9 degrees, and rainfall was comparable to the prior year. The average price of a gallon of gasoline was $3.49, which was 31 cents higher as compared to last December, but it continued its decline from the high in 2011 of $4.13, which was reached in May. And finally, B&T crossings also were different. In December of 2010, the crossings were increased. Looking at customer trends, Easy Pass crossings for the month were up 7.2%, cash crossings were down 11.2%, passenger vehicle travel was up 3%, and trucks increased by 2.8%. All crossings showed a gain in December. The increase ranged from 1.4% at the Henry Hudson Bridge to 6.3% at the 2 Rockaway crossings. That concludes the first part of my report about December traffic. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the second part. The second part compares 2011 to 2010. Let me first talk about some of the factors that influenced traffic over the year. Gas prices averaged $3.71 per gallon for the year of 2011, which was 28% higher than the average price in 2010. Average prices also, as I mentioned before, peaked at over $4 in 2011. Average tolls were $5.30 in 2011, which is about 9% higher than in 2010. And lastly, total precipitation was considerably higher in 2011. There was more than 65 inches of rain over 121 days compared to 41 inches of rain in 2010. Snowfall totals were slightly below 2010 levels, but still well above the average for New York City in a typical winter. The combination of these major factors and others resulted in 283.5 million crossings in 2011, which was 8.1 million less than in 2010. Average daily crossings were almost 777,000 vehicles. February and December were the only 2 months that we had year-to-year increases in traffic. All the other 10 months traffic was lower than the prior year. Easy Pass traffic totaled 225.1 million crossings for the year, or almost 617,000 per day, which was 1.8% more than in 2010. Cash averaged 159,000 crossings, which was 17.3% lower. Passenger vehicle traffic declined by 2.9%. Trucks averaged 53,500 crossings, which was about 1.5% lower. Year over year, all crossings were down. The decline ranged from 0.7% at the major Manhattan crossings to 5.1% at the 2 Rockaway crossings. That concludes the second part of the report. If there are any questions. And then if you turn to the third part of the report, that begins on page 26, Exhibit 11, which graphs the total traffic during the 5-year period. During this period, average daily traffic peaked in October of 2007 at almost 835,000 crossings, has declined, reaching almost 777,000 by the end of 2011. As we previously discussed, traffic seems to have been affected by higher or lower gas prices, weather, especially significant storms, and the price of the toll. Traffic declined from 2007 to 2008 and stabilized in 2009 and 10 during a period when gas remained on average below $3 per gallon. Easy Pass has been on an upward trend since August of 2009, and at the end of 2011 reached its highest daily average ever. Cash was on a decline for almost the entire period, dropping from 225,000 per day in January of 2007 to 160,000 transactions in December of 2011. That concludes my 2007 to 2011 portion of the report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Just on the issue of safety, I had received a letter from Kenneth Poplar, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Staten Island Mental Health Society. During the month of January, we had the second suicide on the Verrazano Bridge, and he had suggested some safety measures that we ought to take a look at. I'm going to hand a copy to Jim as to what other facilities are doing to deal with the issue of suicide prevention.
We will get back to you at the next committee.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reviewing the minutes this month, noticed or read again Andrew's comments about the pattern of traffic at the bridges where non-toll crossings are available. And it struck me as having passed without much, comment one way or the other. I think it's worthy of comment, and I certainly want to lend my support to his observations. And thinking that this committee probably has more direct connection with that issue than any, and I'm just wondering whether some research might be able to come forward from your organization, Jim, that might help us understand better just how how this situation works, has worked, and whether there is a strong basis for perhaps some other actions that would tend to support the view that those free bridges need to be tolled.
I don't have a comment on the tolling issue, but on the traffic numbers, the City of New York DOT, to my knowledge, does a yearly count on traffic that moves across their facilities. We can effort and get that number and present it to you at the next meeting. Those are the only statistical information that we have. We don't do any research in terms of origin or destination. In terms of city bridges, we do our own research on that. We do focus groups, things of that nature, but we don't conduct any type of investigation on traffic patterns on New York City DOT facilities.
One of the other questions, and I won't dwell on this, I think that's a good idea, but one of the other thoughts that I had was just to ascertain to your and our satisfaction as to whether there is whether there are any capacity issues that might need to be addressed. If, for instance, those bridges were tolled and traffic were to be diverted to our big bridges, whether that would present a problem to us.
I would pass your question over to our General Counsel, Peg Terry, because there are steps in terms of environmental studies. If Peg, you can give just a brief overview on...
Back in 2009, as part of the Ravitch Bill, there was a proposal to transfer ownership of the Harlem and East River bridges to the MTA for tolling with the implementation through MTA bridges and tunnels. We did some preliminary analysis of what that would take, but it's highly complicated. I don't believe we ever got to the point to see whether there would be capacity issues if traffic became more rational. That is, rather than driving by the Battery Tunnel to go to one of the free East River crossings like the Brooklyn Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge, people took the quicker route. Just using that as an example, the Battery Tunnel is typically underused. I would be surprised if it created capacity issues. But even if the legislature were to have passed the bill, there are also issues with the fact that we believe each and every one of those bridges had either been built or rebuilt using federal funds, and there are restrictions on the use of tolls for bridges that have been built or rebuilt using Title 23 funds, so that the free bridges, not our bridges, because one of the restrictions is they want you to use the tolls primarily for maintaining the facilities that are tolled. And there were preliminary discussions with the folks down in Washington about, given that it's a unified transportation system and using the money to support transit would in fact make the drivers who use those bridges have less congestion, easier travel, better air quality, and the like. But as one might expect, the feds were fairly resistant to that issue. But because the bill never passed, the discussions were not continued. I don't know if we have hard facts. We do, however, as part of our toll increase, do an environmental analysis, and we look at diversions from our toll plazas and our facilities as a result of toll increases, which would include diversions to other non-tolled facilities, as well as people not making the trip at all, moving to transit. But those, again, are typically analytical rather than going back and looking at the actual data, in large measure because the city's measurements are done, I believe, once a year, and the data is not available for there's a long lag time between when they do the count and when they make the data available.
Well, that's informative. I was on the board at the time. I don't think I was on this committee at the time. But I don't recall any of that detail surfacing. I know that there was a fair amount of, back and forth taking place up in Albany and elsewhere. So, we may have been supporting that effort here, in a sense, behind the scenes. But I think it still is. There's a place for it to land at the MTA in terms of just at least understanding the implications. This would be the committee where it would be, where it would be most comfortable.
And I wouldn't be a bit surprised when we get those DOT figures if the 59th Street Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, and the Broadway Bridge, and the Willis and 3rd Avenue bridges didn't see a huge uptick as a result of the last MTA toll increase. I'd be really surprised.
I mean, you folks are past masters at basically analyzing numbers and understanding traffic in all of its permutations, and so those kinds of things, will lead to your good offices.
Jim, this safety report.
Comments before we move the agenda?
We'll move on to the safety report.
The customer accident report begins on page 32. On page 33 are two charts and two graphs showing the 5-year summary of customer collisions and injuries through December. You note that the collision rate per million vehicles has remained the same as last year, and the injury rate per million vehicles declined by 3.3%. Initiatives included the deployment of the Special Operations Division, a facility is based on a percentage of motor vehicle accidents that occur at each facility, and truck enforcement inspections of trucks for safety infractions. The employee accident report begins on page 40. On page 41 are two charts and two graphs showing the 5-year summary employee accident reports and injuries through December. There were 8 less lost time injuries than the previous year, with the frequency rate dropping 5.3%. On page 42 is a chart showing employee lost time injury incidents by type. The largest category is slips, trips, and falls, as usual. And in one area with a slight increase is of moving vehicles incidents. To address this, we have continued to stress awareness on the plaza during roll call, reviewed signage, improved line striping, and conducted safety interviews following each incident. Unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
If I'm looking at the issue of the customer collision, the pages 34 and 35, I get the impression, and maybe you can certify it or not, that the collision rate increases or decreases with maintenance work or construction work at the facility.
That generally is the way it goes, yes.
I got that impression by looking at it, that they have a direct
Yes.
relationship to each other,
Yes.
based on the RFK, the Throgs Neck, which was and now is not, that went down significantly, and that, I would assume, a relationship of what is happening there.
That's true. That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to introduce the Senior Director of our AET program, Bob Redding, to give the committee a briefing on the pilot program that we're conducting on the Henry Hudson Bridge. Bob?
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon. We were before this committee in September of 2010 to give an overview of the project and the various components of the project. So we're a little over a year in now, and we wanted to give you an update on where we are and where we're headed. So there's a presentation that looks like you all have now. So I'm on the second page of that presentation. Just a quick review of what the project entails. There are essentially three components, major components of the project. The first is to remove the gates at the Henry Hudson Bridge and allow Easy Pass customers to drive through the facility nonstop, and to investigate the technologies necessary to do that. Second is to move as many people from paying cash to paying with Easy Pass, and so we have a series of improvements that I'll talk about later in the presentation in order to do that. And then the last step, the last piece, is to run that plaza in a cashless configuration. So we selected the Henry Hudson Bridge for a number of reasons. It's a fairly small facility. It's very high Easy Pass market share going into the project, and it does not support truck traffic, all of which minimize the revenue risk for the pilot. And then also from a safety perspective and operations perspective, there are no entrances and exits near the plaza, which complicate the operation of the plaza. And another reason we picked the Henry Hudson was because the deck there and the toll plaza are due for replacement, and if we can show that gateless or cashless operation can be used, we can significantly reduce the amount of construction work that needs to be done in replacing that infrastructure. So that was another reason why we selected that plaza. Page 3, results thus far. We removed the gates on January 20th of 2011. During the rest of 2011, there were about 21.3 million crossings. The technology that we've installed there, the cameras, sensors, and software, has performed very well. We've collected the toll from 99.7% of the crossings. And then overall, we're revenue neutral, taking into account the cost of collecting from those vehicles. And we, as we've discussed, I think, in a couple meetings, there's a $50 violation fee, and we waive it for first-time violators. And the payment of that fee is what allowed us to be revenue neutral. And the operations at the plaza, we've been able to increase the ability of the plaza to handle traffic by about 25% during the peak period. So taken together, the results are very promising, and we see no reason why we shouldn't move on to the cashless step, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. Yes?
Before you leave this page, that so far is pretty good. When you say that the toll collections are 99.7%, would that include, I don't know exactly how to say this, tolls that you've had to collect through other means, meaning that people who didn't have Easy Pass go through, and you got to go after them by, however you do.
Yes.
And what I think, from my perspective, an important piece of information would be the number of or the percentage of people people that go through without an easy pass and who require further care?
Well, the 99.7 includes those who had a valid Easy Pass at the time of crossing, those who had an Easy Pass account, but for whatever reason they didn't bring their tag that day or they didn't mount it correctly in the window, and so we collected from them after the fact from using an image of their license plate. And it also includes people who drove through without an account, and we sent them a violation notice and they paid that notice. So that remains about 0.3%. About 0.1% of that is what we call technical loss, which is for whatever reason we were not able to capture a license plate that's usable for the purpose. And that the other 0.2% are those that we are still pursuing to collect the toll from.
If I could just ask a question related to that. Do you have to have agreements with various state departments of motor vehicles to collect from folks that go through without paying?
Yes, we do.
Do you have it with all northeastern states, for instance?
Yes, we do. For the purpose of violation processing, yes.
Yes.
You got Iowa?
Well, Iowa's,
Northeastern.
Mark, just for you, Iowa's in process, yes.
Oh, okay.
But all the Northeast is covered.
Changing my registration.
New Brunswick, yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed Andrew.
I said, so all the northeastern states are covered?
Definitely all the northeastern states, yes. Again, for the purpose of violation processing,
Yes.
It's not true for the purpose of collecting, just collecting the toll from someone in all electronic tolling. And when we get to cashless, we do not have that agreement, and we're working on those agreements.
Why did you waive the $50 surcharge for first-time violators?
It's been a long-held policy of the New York Customer Service Center. Our partners at the Thruway and the Port Authority do that for their...
They waived the first?
Yes.
Was there an increase in the number of people who went through without either a valid pass or a valid account than before the gateless operation?
Before gateless operation, there was a gate to prevent that from happening.
I understand.
So
But so basically,
yes, there was an increase,
of course,
because there's no gate to stop them.
Yep. Okay.
How does this number, the 99.7, which is a tremendous number, compare with other agencies in the region which have gateless collection?
Actually, I'm very glad you asked that question, because Henry Hudson is very favorable in this respect, because we have no trucks,
Right.
because we have a very high percentage of market share, and the demographics are favorable. The customer demographics are favorable. We don't expect this to be the same at the rest of our facilities. So it would compare very favorably.
He means there's no truck drivers.
Right, well, that's, yeah.
It would compare very favorably to our other regional toll authorities. This would be, this is
Okay.
the best it's going to be, probably.
Right, that's my impression. This
Yep,
is the best it's gonna be.
absolutely.
Yes.
Want to move the agenda there?
Okay, so I'm on slide 4. Moving people to use EasyPass. EasyPass is by far our most accurate, most efficient, and cheapest way to collect toll, and it's also the cheapest for our customers. So we have a number of things going on. Our EasyPass on the Go program, since June we started selling on the Go packages actually in the cash toll lanes at Henry Hudson. It's been successful beyond our wildest dreams. We've approaching 9,000 tags since June. Just phenomenal. We never expected it to be that good. And we're also looking to expand at other facilities by Memorial Day. In January, we released Spanish versions of our website, our IVR, the phone system, and all of our printed materials. I'm going to just briefly skip over the reload card and come right back to it. We're also going to be introducing a pay-per-trip, which allows people to give us their say, checking account number, and their tolls would be deducted every day for that day, at the end of the day, for their tolls would go directly as a ACH transaction, so they would not have to have a prepaid balance. So the reload card is something that we're very proud of, and it just launched last Tuesday. We're using a card that looks very much like a credit card, although it's not a credit card. You see a picture of it in the slide there. And we're using the existing Visa ReadyLink network, so we didn't have to build anything, we didn't have to write any software, we didn't have to do anything except use their network. There are about 4,000 locations in the metro area. I think the number is 3,000 roughly. And it's all across the nation as well, so you could go into somewhere in California and reload your EasyPass. But what it does is it makes it very convenient for customers to go with the card, which identifies their account, and cash, and put cash on their account. Currently, if you want to pay cash for EasyPass, you have to go to one of 3 service centers that we have in the metro area. So this is a huge increase in convenience for those who want to use cash. Again, we released it on Tuesday. We've had a few hundred requests for cards, and we expect to start to see the transactions occurring at places like Duane Reade, 7-Eleven, those kinds of places.
How long had that program been in the works?
About a year.
Those are 2 extraordinary initiatives, the on-the-go EasyPass and the renewable card are absolutely extraordinary, and how you innovated and accomplished them in such a short period of time, you really deserve enormous gratitude. These are terrific services, both of them, for the commuter, and really helps keep the volume up too. It's quite an accomplishment.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
I'm going to lay over the cashless operations discussion until the next meeting, because it's going to need more time than we have, and we're running up against finance here. We have a bunch of other items to deal with.
Okay, we'll move it along to the CES report. Jim Fortunato.
Good afternoon. Following is a summary of the fourth quarter 2011 results. Bridges and tunnels striped 314,396 linear feet of roadway in 2011. 2001, 449 feet of roadway alone in the fourth quarter. B&T repaired 1,006 potholes in the fourth quarter and 8,323 potholes at year-end 2011. I just want to point out that the overall collision rate with injuries is the lowest that it's been in 8 years at a rate of 0.87, and that concludes my report.
No further questions. We'll move on to the EasyPass performance report. Don Spiro.
Thanks, Jim. EasyPass report starts on page 55. In 2011, our year-end market share was 80.3%. By far our highest year-end share ever. It was 77.1% last year, which was our second highest. Every facility showed an increase this year, and 8 of the 10 plazas now have market shares above 80% on weekdays compared to 5 out of 10 last year. EasyPass accounts at the end of the year reached more than 2.15 million, 7% higher than last year. More than 3,100 EasyPass on-the-go accounts were opened in December. More than one-third of the accounts opened for the month. More than 46,000 on-the-go accounts were opened for the year, which is about 27% of the total. And at the Henry Hudson, as Bob alluded, that program's been very successful. We sold 625 tags in December, and as he said, 8,900 to date. That concludes the EasyPass report. I'll move on to the financial report on page 61 if there are no questions. This month our report covers our preliminary 2011 actuals against our 2011 final estimates. It's a good news story. For the year, we had revenues of approximately $1.53 billion, which is $3.4 million or 0.2% above the final estimate. Toll revenue, of course, makes up the overwhelming majority, about 98% of all that revenue. It was about $3 million above the final estimate, with the mild weather in December helping significantly. On the expense side, total expenses were $373.1 million, 18.4 million, 4.7% below the final estimate. Most of the positive variance was on the non-labor side, primarily in maintenance and other operating expenses, professional service contracts, materials, and supplies. Total, those three categories were total non-labor underrun of about $16.3 million. On the labor side, we were also under. Total was about $222.6 million, 2.1 lower than the final estimate. Lower payroll of about $800,000 and lower overtime of about $1 million. And overtime continues to be one of our successes. Was down 5.2% against the final estimate, a testament to the continuing management efforts that we've been undertaking in that area. The total support to mass transit for 2011 was $939.6 million, 37.3 million, 4% above the final estimate. Since we joined the MTA in 1968, we're now up to $18.7 billion in support to mass transit. That concludes the December financial report. If you don't mind, I'm going to skip ahead to item 9 and go back to item 8 on the agenda. Item 9 is the 2012 adopted budget, 2012 to 15 financial plan. It begins on page 83. It's an information item, includes a monthly allocation of the 2012 expenses, revenue, and traffic. Basically what we'll be comparing our expenses against and our revenue against through the first half of the year. The adopted budget incorporates the MTA adjustments that were presented in the November financial plan and adopted by the board in December 11. They're summarized in this book. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory. So there's no questions on the adopted budget. I'll move back to item 8, which is an action item in regard to the TBTA operating surplus. It begins on page 73. There's a staff summary, and included in the attachments to this staff summary are 9 resolutions associated with transferring the operating surplus to MTA. They can be summarized as follows. There's resolutions to certify and transfer $527,658,028,658,000 in 2011 operating surplus to the MTA and New York City Transit pursuant to Section 1219 A of the New York State Public Authorities Law. There's also resolutions to transfer the 2011 investment income of $85,100 to the MTA pursuant to Section 569C of the New York State Public Authorities Law. There's a resolution to deduct from fiscal year 2012 operating revenues of TBTA the amount of $14,548,000 to be deposited into a necessary reconstruction reserve, which was adopted by the board resolution on March 19, 1968. And money credited to the reserve will be applied to the payment and costs and expense and anticipated necessary construction of TBTA facilities. There's a resolution to deduct from fiscal year 2012 operating revenues and set aside into a special account an amount determined from time to time to help fund post-retirement liabilities other than pension benefits of its employees. And finally, there are resolutions pursuant to the Public Authorities Law to advance monthly the fiscal year 2012 TBTA surplus to the MTA and New York City Transit, an aggregate amount not to exceed 90% of the estimate of the sum of the month's operations, if available, and with the first $1.8 million going to New York City Transit, the remaining sum split 50-50 between New York City Transit and MTA, less applicable bond service. So that is the official resolution. Your approval is requested.
What happens if we vote no to turning over $527 million surplus?
I think Bob Foran would be very disappointed. Right.
I'll move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move on to the capital program. Joe Keen.
Good afternoon. The report on the capital program can be found on page 107 of the book. This month's report provides an overview of our 2012 capital plan. In total, in 2012, we plan to award 73 tasks with a budgeted value of $578.6 million, and we plan to complete 6 projects with a budgeted value of $285.8 million. The 3 major commitments in our plan are listed at the top of the page. Currently, major commitments for the year are shown also in more detail on Attachment 2, which you can find on page 109 of the book. And details on our completion plan are to be found in Attachment 4 on page 111 of the book. Currently, we are on target and on schedule to meet all of our 2012 awards and completions. Unless there are any questions, that completes my report.
Okay.
And we'll move on to procurements. Tony Kessler.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. There are 4 procurements this month totaling about $1.69 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. The 4 procurements are competitive and are summarized as follows. Starting on page 119, there is a request for a 1-year miscellaneous procurement contract with Shared Solutions and Services, Inc. to maintain and repair Sienna hardware and software in the amount of $25,687. The second item is on pages 119 and 120. This is a personal service contract with Hardesty & Hanover, LLP, to provide construction management and inspection services for Project HH07, structural rehabilitation at the Henry Hudson Bridge for $878,368 over a period of 2 years to 6 months. Item 3 on page 120 is a 2-year personal service contract with the Enviromed Services, Inc. to provide independent safety monitoring services for ongoing construction projects in the amount of $734,085. The last procurement on page 121 is a 2-year personal service, is a 3-year miscellaneous service contract with Verrazano Exterminating Corps to perform indoor and outdoor exterminating services at various facilities in the amount of $49,695. And this month, there are no ratifications. Unless you have any questions, that concludes my report.
I move the procurements.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
And that ends our report to the committee. Thank you.
Motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second? Favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.